National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State are giving comments after their meeting with Ukrainian leaders. Let's listen.
His number one interest is ending this war once and for all. Today we made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable and accounts for their interests, their security, their ability to prosper as a nation. I want to personally we both want to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, His Majesty, for hosting us, for making this possible. They've been instrumental in this process, and we're very grateful to them for hosting us here today. And hopefully we'll take this offer now to the Russians. And we hope that they'll say yes, to peace. The ball is now in their court. And, but again, the President's objective here is, number one, above everything else, he wants the war to end. And I think today Ukraine has taken a concrete step in that regard. We hope the Russians will reciprocate.
Well, just to add to the Secretary's comments, the Ukrainian delegation today made something very clear, that they share President Trump's vision for peace. They share his determination to end the fighting, to end the killing, to end the tragic kind of meat grinder of people and national treasure that's happening on the front in Ukraine. Number one. Number two, they made concrete steps and concrete proposals, not only accepting our proposal for a full ceasefire, which you can see the details of which are in our joint statement that we released together, but we also got into substantive details on how this war is going to permanently end. What type of guarantees they're going to have for their long-term security and prosperity, but also really looking at what it's going to take to finally end this, the horrific fighting. The other piece that I just want to make very clear is President Trump started this diplomatic effort in the Oval Office, talking to both leaders, both President Putin and President Zelensky back to back. And now that shuttle diplomacy continues. We have a named delegation in terms of next steps from the Russian side. We have a named delegation in terms of next steps from the Ukrainian side. I will talk to my Russian counterpart in the coming days. Secretary Rubio will be with G7 foreign ministers in the next couple of days. We have the NATO Secretary General in the White House on Thursday, and we'll take the process forward from there. So, as a result of that, and I think as a result of this positive step forward, the President has decided to lift the pause on aid and on our security assistance to Ukraine going forward, and that's effective immediately.
All right, your colleagues have chosen 3 questioners. Let's start with Alex Marquardt of CNN.
Thank you. Several questions on the ceasefire. We understood that coming into this was a Ukrainian proposal for a partial ceasefire. How did this become an American proposal for an immediate 30-day ceasefire? And to be clear, you're talking about a complete ceasefire across the front line, not just the aerial and maritime ceasefire that the Ukrainians proposed. And then finally, how do you expect to take this to the Russians? Is it Mr. Witkoff, who we understand is heading to Moscow later this week? Will he deliver that to Putin? Will it be President Trump to President Putin? Will it be you and your counterparts? How will that actually happen and when?
Well, on the first point, your question is yes. That's the offer. The offer is to stop the shooting. The goal here is the only way out to end this war is to negotiate out of it. There's no military solution to this war. The solution to this war and the way to end it and to achieve the President's objective of peace is to negotiate. But before you can negotiate, you have to stop shooting at each other. And that's what the President has wanted to see, and that's the commitment we got today from the Ukrainian side, their willingness to do that. Obviously now that'll be delivered to the Russians. It'll be delivered to them directly through multiple channels, meaning not only will they obviously see it, it'll be communicated to them through our diplomatic channels, through conversations and other methods, but they'll obviously be well aware. And our hope is that the Russians will say yes, that they will also agree. So the shooting will stop, the killing will stop, the dying will stop, and the talks can begin about how to end this war permanently in a way that's acceptable and enduring for both sides.
Look, there's been all kinds of discussions in terms of different types of ceasefires, You know, there was the deal in terms of grain moving years ago. There's been discussion of halting aerial attacks on each other's infrastructure. The president has made it clear, and certainly made it clear to us, that all fighting needs to stop. And the Ukrainians have agreed to that proposal. They're ready for peace. And now we'll take that to the Russians and get their response.
Let's bring in Ian Bremmer, who's the founder and president of Eurasia Group and G0 Media, to talk about this. We also should note, Ian, that military aid and intelligence sharing, which had been paused from the U.S. to Ukraine, is now being reinstated. It sounds like as it was before. What do you make of this development, of course, with the understanding Russia has a big say here?
Well, irrespective of how the Russians respond, this has changed the dynamic. I wouldn't say this puts Zelensky back in Trump's good graces. That's an exaggeration. But it certainly means that the Ukrainians have some initiative, that they have been prepared to accept the terms as offered by the United States to stop the fighting for 30 days. And they're prepared to do that right now. And given that Trump's election campaign promise for months is, I'm going to end this war, and the American people, whether you're Democrat or Republican, you'd like to see this war over. You'd like to see the fighting stop. You'd like to see the money stop. You'd like to see the killing stop. So now Zelensky can say, I approve that. And the Europeans can stand up for it, and I suspect they will in very short order. We haven't heard that yet, but over the coming hours, I suspect you'll see lots of Europeans saying, yes, we're in favor of this. What about Putin? And, Putin hasn't taken back all of the territory that Ukraine occupies right now in Kursk, in Russian territory. He certainly wants to do that. He has acted correctly, in my view, as if time is on his side, that he can outlast the Ukrainians. So he has much less interest in accepting these terms, certainly not by themselves. I mean, his interest in talking to Trump has been all about a broader deal between Russia and the United States, not focused on the Ukrainian ceasefire, Ukraine as just a piece of that, and probably not the first piece from the Kremlin's perspective. So clearly, I think at the very least, I can't imagine that Putin is going to suddenly accept these terms in the next 24 hours. I suspect he's going to want to get a meeting directly with Trump as soon as possible, face to face, where he can talk about, if I'm going to end this war and give you something you really want, not on my time frame, what are all of the other things that we could and should be doing together? And by the way, let's keep the Europeans out of that conversation. That's where I think Putin's head is right now.
Ian, if you can stand by for us as we are following this developing news, this breaking news. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, saying in Saudi Arabia, the ball is now in Russia's court as U.S. and Ukrainian officials have come to an agreement on a 30-day ceasefire they're going to put before Russia. Let's go to Alex Marquardt. He's there in Saudi Arabia. Alex, we heard you ask that first question during the availability. I'm not sure you got a straightforward answer to your question, but just take us through what has happened there today. It's a big day.
It certainly is. And the expectation, the way that Rubio had framed it on the way in, was that this was going to be a listening session, that the U.S. side was going to be listening to the American side to eventually sort of come up with some positions that they could then take back to the Russians. This, Brianna, is a lot more concrete. This shows that not only is this U.S.-Ukraine relationship essentially back on track, but they are moving forward in tandem. One of the things that we thought would be discussed today was a Ukrainian proposal for a partial ceasefire. Instead, what we're learning now is essentially that the U.S. took that and ran with it. And they are now saying that this is a U.S. proposal, not for a partial, but for a full ceasefire for at least 30 days immediately, that could then be extended. So this goes well beyond what the Ukrainians were imagining and putting forward. And so when I asked Rubio for specifics, he made clear this isn't just about the end of aerial bombardment and the end of the fighting in the Black Sea that the Ukrainians talked about. The U.S. wants all of the guns to fall silent. And he says that Ukrainians have agreed to this. And now it goes to the Russians at multiple levels, he says, because we know that Steve Witkoff, the special envoy, is going to be in Russia later this week. But this is going to be communicated, we're told, to the Russians at several levels. And if the Russians don't accept it, Rubio said, we will then know who the impediment to peace is. And of course, he's referring to the Russians there. The other big part of this is that military and intelligence assistance that had notably been paused, that severely damaged the Ukrainians in the wake of that disastrous White House meeting, that is now immediately being lifted, that pause. It will immediately go back into effect. We heard the National Security Advisor Mike Waltz saying it will go back to the normal stream of things, if you will, the Presidential Drawdown Authority, as it's known. So 2 major wins for the Ukrainians here, and the ball, Brianna, is now firmly in Russia's court.